Hello, my name is Darcy Hudson. I'm 50 years old and I live in Boise, Idaho. Never in my wildest dreams did I imagine I'd one day stand before countless strangers, sharing such raw pieces of my life. For nearly 2 years, I carried the weight of that dreadful night alone, not out of fear of judgment, but because I needed every ounce of that time to unravel, to even begin to process the storm that had torn through my existence. Before all this chaos erupted, my life would have seemed beautifully ordinary to most people. I had a stable job that I poured myself into, a modest little house that smelled faintly of pine and old books, and all the gentle rhythms and small dramas that make up everyday life. I'm also the mother of Jacob, my precious boy, whose life changed forever when a tragic accident at Redfish Lake left him in a wheelchair at just 6 years old. I used to be the kind of woman who believed love could heal anything, until the day I learned that my husband, Archie, had shattered our marriage in the worst possible way, and not just by betraying me, but by destroying the most sacred friendship I ever had. The woman he turned to was my best friend, the person I trusted with my deepest laughter and my darkest tears, and if that wasn't cruel enough, she was carrying a baby. The news didn't just break me, it made me a spectacle. Whispers trailed me wherever I went. People's gazes softened with pity or sharpened with judgment. I could feel their curiosity clawing at my private pain, like spectators slowing down at a wreck just to gawk. At the same time, a strange pain began creeping through my left arm. It was a dull ache at first, sometimes prickling like tiny needles. Other days, it felt as if an invisible boulder sat on that one arm, pressing until my entire shoulder drooped with the strain. He's prey. But with so many other fires to put out, I pushed it aside.
Besides, who would even notice?
Most people were too engrossed in dissecting the scandal of my ruined marriage to see the subtle ways my body was crying out. In that suffocating mess, Jacob was my lifeline. My son knew nothing of Archie's betrayal, and I vowed to protect him from that poison. It was already more than enough that he faced a life forever altered by that accident. I couldn't let his innocent heart also bear the jagged weight of adult treachery. Eventually, when it emerged that the child my former best friend carried was not Archie's, he came stumbling back. He knelt before me with tears in his eyes, vowing he was a changed man, desperate to piece together what he had smashed. But all I could see were the ruins, walls blackened and hollow where love used to live. How do you rebuild a home when the very beams are eaten through with rot? With rot. Every apology was a ghost, stirring up memories that cut deeper each time. The tenderness we once shared had soured, leaving behind a residue of quiet resentment that coated my tongue so heavily it couldn't even taste my own sorrow anymore. Inshidikalogy betraystum sivinivchi. Itiobabpas infana. I felt like a visitor in my own life, lost in a maze of memories I could never reclaim, and futures I was too terrified to imagine. I wanted to flee, needed to flee, but the chains of uncertainty kept me rooted. Who was I without this family? Where could I run when my body was already a battlefield, my spirit a scorched plain? Looking back now, it's painfully clear I was teetering on the edge. When the last drop of your spirit dries up, it's almost as if the universe, or maybe God himself, steps in. And when he does, nothing remains untouched. Hinty and ears, nothing remains untouched. It started so simply, almost innocently. Some old friends invited me for a poker night. I agreed, not because I had any great love for cards, but because I was starved for a taste of the person I used to be. For a few brief hours, I could be Darcy again, just Darcy. Not the humiliated wife, not the overburdened mother, just me. The laughter was unpolished and real, and the moments sparkled in my memory like tiny stars piercing a black sky. But peace was a fragile thing in my life. Just when I started to feel the faintest echo of normal, Archie crashed back in. He appeared at the door unannounced, his breath heavy with whiskey, his eyes two pools of feverish red. He ordered me to come home with him, my chest cinched with panic and revulsion, tangled with a weariness that had become almost second nature. So I went, maybe because it was easier than enduring a scene, maybe because a sliver of the old hope still lived somewhere inside me, whispering that maybe, just maybe, things could right themselves. Or maybe because I was simply too tired to keep saying no. Archie insisted I drive his brand new car, a sleek machine I'd never even touched before. The idea of steering something so unfamiliar knotted my stomach, but as always, I complied. Sometimes surrender feels safer than defiance. The drive was suffocating. I clenched the wheel until my fingers ached, keeping my eyes pinned to the lonely stretch of asphalt, all too aware of Archie's eyes boring into me. Then, like a match to tinder, he started talking. Words tumbled out of him, messy and raw, nostalgic for what we'd once had, bitter for how far we'd fallen. His voice slid between soft regret and hard-edged blame with every breath. Without warning, his hand shot out, not tenderly, but with a harsh insistence. His thick fingers closed around mine, yanking at my wedding ring. That ring, once a radiant promise of forever, now nothing but a cold band mocking everything I'd lost. I pulled my hand back on instinct, not out of love, but because that ring was the last fragile relic of the woman I'd been, the one who believed in forever. That was when everything inside him seemed to crack. Archie's face twisted, consumed by a darkness I'd never seen so clearly, and then he lunged. One moment I was simply trying to keep the car steady, trying to survive the conversation. The next he was on top of me. His weight crashed down, pinning me against the seat. His hands clamped with a force that seemed to come from somewhere beyond him. The stench of alcohol filled my lungs, and the eyes that once looked at me with love were now filled with a fury that chilled me to the bone. I tried to scream, but his arm crushed my throat. I couldn't breathe. My lungs burned, desperate for air. My hands, which just moments before had been gripping the wheel, now clawed at his skin, trying to shove him away. But it was useless. Archie was too strong, and the alcohol raging through his veins only seemed to fuel that monstrous strength. My vision blurred. Tiny black dots danced before my eyes. I could hear my own heartbeat pounding in my ears, like a frantic drum, counting down the last precious seconds I might have left. That feeling when your own body betrays you, begging to live but too weak to keep fighting, is something I will carry with me forever. A rush of thoughts flooded my mind in those moments. I thought of Jacob, my beautiful boy. If I didn't survive, who would care for him? How could he possibly cope with losing his mother in a world that had already stolen so much from him? I thought of my parents, of old friends I hadn't seen in years, of all the things I still longed to do. So many dreams left unfulfilled, dangling just beyond my reach. Then, just when I felt myself slipping beyond the edge, when my body was about to surrender completely, something unexpected. It was as if a thick veil had suddenly been lifted. The pain, the terror, the crushing panic all vanished. I felt light, as if I no longer belonged to the body trapped under Archie's weight. I began to drift. At first, I assumed I had simply passed out. Then I realized I could still see everything, only with a shocking clarity I had never experienced before. I saw Archie still there in the car, slumped against the driver's seat. I saw my own face, eerily pale and motionless, drained of every spark of life. But I was no longer inside that fragile shell. I was above it, hovering, watching everything play out like a tragic scene in a movie that I couldn't pause or rewind. I saw the precise moment Archie realized what he'd done, I watched the horror spread across his face, saw his hands tremble as he let go of my neck, and began to shake my shoulders, calling out my name, Darcy, Darcy, over and over. But I couldn't answer. My body lay there, unresponsive. That's when it struck me. I hadn't merely fainted, I was dead. Strangely, I wasn't afraid. Instead, I was enveloped by a peace so profound, so gentle, I almost didn't recognize it. And just when I thought I had seen the most incredible thing possible, something even more miraculous began to unfold. A brilliant light appeared. It was unlike anything I had ever witnessed. It wasn't just bright, it was warm, deeply inviting, overflowing with a love that felt impossibly vast. Somehow I knew without question that my journey was far from over. In fact, it was only just beginning. Wrapped in that breathtaking light, I felt myself being lifted. Not wrenched or pulled, but guided, gently, carefully, lovingly. I was floating yet perfectly supported. There was no fear, no ache, only an exquisite, holy calm, the sensation of being tenderly welcomed home. As I drifted further from the scene of the struggle, my awareness expanded, no longer bound by the limits of a human body. I could feel, hear, and understand everything all at once. Colors were richer, sounds were crystalline, and even the air seemed alive with energy that pulsed softly around me. Suddenly, I found myself in a realm words failed to describe. It felt as though I was everywhere and nowhere at the same time. Time itself lost all meaning. Past, present, and future melted together into a single eternal moment. In that space, truths I had never understood on Earth became clear. It was as if all the mysteries of existence were right there, waiting for me to remember them. I understood the sacred purpose of life, the staggering power of love, the delicate threads that connect every living being. I saw how each choice we make, each act of kindness or cruelty, sends ripples that weave through the vast tapestry of eternity. And there I was, Darcy Hudson, standing at the threshold of a reality where nothing was hidden and unconditional love was the very air I breathed. My life spread out before me, not as a neat timeline, but as an intricate mosaic. Every moment, every relationship, every heartache and joy fit together with a divine precision. I saw the chances I had seized, the opportunities I'd let slip away, the countless lessons etched into my soul, but there was no harsh judgment, no regret, only a deep, tender understanding. Then, right in the heart of that brilliance, I sensed a presence. It wasn't just light or energy, it was someone, radiant, majestic, filled with a love so consuming it, wrapped around me like the warmest embrace. He began to walk toward me, and though he didn't speak out loud, my very soul recognized him instantly. It was Jesus. Our eyes met, and in that gaze I saw infinity. He didn't need to tell me who he was. I had always known. As we moved together through the memories of my life, there were no spoken words, only pure knowing, shared through thoughts and feelings that needed no translation. I poured out questions I hadn't even realized were buried inside me. Why does suffering exist? What is the purpose of our struggles? What comes after this life? He didn't respond with neat human explanations. Instead, he let truth pour into me like sunlight into a dark room. It wasn't information. It was remembering, like I had always known, deep down, but had finally been opened enough to see. I understood that our time on Earth is a sacred classroom, that every heartache, every obstacle is a lesson carefully crafted to shape us. I saw that love is the strongest force in all creation, more powerful than pain, stronger even than death, and that we are bound to one another in ways more intricate than I could have ever imagined. Every small act of compassion, every whispered prayer, ripples out forever. Then my thoughts turned to Archie and what he had done. But instead of rage or bitterness, I was overwhelmed by compassion. I could see his wounds, his lifelong fears, the shadows that twisted him into the man who hurt me. It didn't excuse what he'd done, but for the first time, I saw the broken soul behind his broken choices. My heart then surged with another thought. Jacob, my sweet boy. A flood of fierce, endless love rushed through me. I saw that his life, though heavy with trials, carried a sacred purpose. He was destined to be a beacon, to touch countless lives with his resilience and quiet strength. Jesus turned to me once more, his eyes soft yet commanding. Suddenly, a vivid scene unfolded. I saw Jacob, no longer a little boy bound to a wheelchair, but a young man standing tall and strong. He moved with quiet confidence. Beside him was a young woman, her eyes bright with devotion. She was his wife. My heart swelled. The vision shifted, and I saw them in a cozy, sunlit home. Jacob was laughing, lifting two small children, my grandchildren, high into the air. Their giggles were like music, pure and golden. The scene changed again, showing him surrounded by books and eager faces, deeply immersed in his work. He had become a respected professional, someone making a difference in people's lives. The vision continued. I saw Jacob standing before large crowds, sharing his story, his voice steady and full of quiet power. Faces in the audience lit up with tears and wonder as he spoke. I watched strangers reach for each other's hands, moved by the hope radiating from my son's words. I saw Jacob being honored, receiving awards for his dedication and impact. His smile was humble, almost shy, but his eyes sparkled with a deep sense of purpose. Each accolade wasn't just for personal achievement, it felt like a triumph over every obstacle life had thrown at him. Then I watched him age, gracefully, surrounded by people who clearly adored him. Family and lifelong friends gathered around a table heavy with food, laughter echoing through a sunlit room. I could almost smell the coffee and cinnamon on the air. He looked at peace, content, a man who knew he had lived well. In every glimpse, Jacob radiated a gentle strength, a joy that didn't need to shout, and a resolve carved from years of hardship. It was the future I once dared to dream of for him on sleepless nights, though I had never fully believed it was possible. As these scenes unfolded, understanding washed over me like warm rain. This wasn't just for comfort. It was a charge laid upon my spirit. Jacob needed me, not only in these tender years when he still leaned on my care. Through every step toward becoming that remarkable man, I felt it in my bones. I had to go back. No matter how exhausted, no matter how much it hurt, I needed to return. Jacob would rely on me to stand firm, to keep believing in him, to never stop fighting for the light within him. The images began to fade, dissolving slowly until only the feeling remained, a blazing core of purpose, hope, and love without conditions. I knew the road wouldn't be gentle. Dark nights would still come. Doubt would still hiss at my door. But now I had seen why it was worth it. As the final image of Jacob vanished, I felt prepared, ready to return, ready to be the mother he would need every step of the way, ready to help build the future God had just unveiled for us. Before I could reunite with my body, however, there was still one final journey awaiting me. It was a journey I could never have imagined, a place that shattered my understanding of life and death, a truth that would brand itself on my soul forever. Just as I thought nothing could be more overwhelming, the radiant light began to dim. In its place came a pressing, smothering darkness that wrapped around me like heavy cloth. I felt myself being pulled downward into a realm that unmade everything I thought I knew. Suddenly, I was there. It was a place that could only be described as hell, but not the cartoon hell of flames, devils, and pitchforks. This was something far more horrifying. The air was dense with a foul stench, sulfur mixed with a deep, aching despair. The temperature swung wildly from biting cold that stole my breath to waves of searing heat that seemed to blister my very essence. Time twisted strangely here, each heartbeat stretching into forever. Around me were countless souls. They were not people as we know them, but shadowy forms, writhing and contorting in endless anguish. Some appeared to burn, yet were never consumed, caught in a flame that tortured but did not destroy. Others floated in a void, so dark it was as though all light had been erased, isolated from sound, touch, and even the memory of connection. I watched souls endlessly relive their greatest shames and cruelties, stuck in loops that offered no escape. The sound was the worst, a cacophony of wails and broken cries, not just noise, but raw heartbreak echoing across eternity. As I tried to make sense of what I saw, something deeply disturbing struck me. Some of these souls clearly had been cremated after death, their bodies reduced to ash long ago. Panic surged in me. I turned toward the faint glow still hovering nearby. Jesus, who had walked with me through the realms of heaven, now seemed cloaked in the gravity of this place. "Is this because they were cremated?" I asked, my voice trembling, the question blooming straight from my confusion and fear. The answer didn't come as spoken words. Instead, a wave of undeniable truth flooded through me. No, cremation was not a sin. They were not here because of what had happened to their bodies. They were here because of what they had chosen with their lives. It was like a stone dropped into the deepest part of me. This was no punishment from a harsh, arbitrary God. This was simply the consequence of a soul's choices, an honest mirror of the heart, not a sentence handed down from above. Each person here had in their own way constructed this prison, some through deliberate harm, through greed or cruelty, others through cold indifference to suffering that demanded compassion. But what tore at me most were the souls who suffered here because they could not forgive themselves. They had woven their own chains from guilt and shame, locking themselves into torment without ever realizing the door was open. My spirit ached with a compassion so fierce it almost felt like it would tear me apart. I understood that many of them didn't even see the possibility of release. They were so tangled in self-condemnation they couldn't imagine stepping into the light. Then my thoughts turned, unbidden, to Archie, the man whose violence had dragged me to death's edge. There was a time I believed I would hate him forever, but standing there, bathed in the unflinching honesty of that place, all I felt was a sorrow so profound it nearly knocked me over. If Archie never changed, if he stayed blind to what he had done, this could be his eternity. I wouldn't wish that fate on any living being, not even him. That lesson branded itself deeper than any scar on flesh. Chosen pretty, every careless word, every selfish choice, every cruel or indifferent thought carries weight. They either lift us closer to light or drag us into shadow. It was never God's arbitrary hand that placed a soul here. It was the echo of their own making. When I was finally pulled from that abyss, it felt like being lifted from the deepest trench of the sea. Easy. But I didn't rise up afraid. I emerged with a fire inside me, a clarity sharper than anything I had known. I realized I was returning not just for Jacob, not only to help guide my son into that shining future I'd seen, but to become a living reminder, a witness that light still exists, even when darkness is thick around us. That no matter what we've done, we can always choose again to love, to forgive, to let go of the prisons we've built for ourselves, and step into a new way of living. It was time to go back. I felt the gentle but relentless tug guiding me home. The return was brutal, my limitless spirit forced back into the cramped, aching confines of mortal flesh. I gasped as my lungs remembered breath. My heart thundered painfully. The divine truths I had held so close slipped from me like fog. When my eyes finally opened, the world seemed duller, as though a veil lay over everything. Archie hovered above me, his face drawn in lines of panic and regret. His hands clutched at me. His voice, hoarse and desperate, whispered my name over and over. But his touch crawled over my skin like another violation. This was no longer the man I had once built my dreams around. He was the reason I had crossed into death. My voice was a fragile raft, but it held a strength I didn't set recognize. Archie, let me go. Whether it was shame, denial, or a desperate need to fix what couldn't be undone, he kept his hands on me, kept trying to soothe me with words that fell flat. Summoning strength I didn't know I had. I pushed him away. Pain surged through my body, but I didn't care. I stumbled out of the car, barefoot on the cold ground, inhaling the night air, like it was the first breath I had taken in years. Everything felt surreal. The distant barking of dogs, the damp grass under my feet, the streetlights casting a flickering glow. It was all painfully familiar, yet strangely foreign. Archie followed me, stumbling a bit, his voice raw with desperation. Darcy, please. I am sorry. I don't even know what happened. It was like something took over me. I turned around and faced him fully. In that moment, he looked so small, shrunken by guilt and fear. For a fleeting heartbeat, pity pierced me. I remembered the souls I had seen in hell, trapped not by chains, but by the weight of their own self-condemnation. But then came the memory of his hands crushing my neck. He, the terror, the darkness swallowing me whole. I stiffened. Don't come any closer, I said, my voice steady though my heart pounded. It's done. He reached out again, his eyes glistening. Darcy, please. I'll change. I swear it to you. I'll fix everything. But something inside me had shifted so profoundly that there was no turning back. This isn't fear talking anymore. It's power. You didn't almost kill me, Archie. You did. I died in that car. His brow furrowed, confusion and horror twisting his features. He opened his mouth, but I cut him off. How could I possibly make him understand? How could he grasp the brilliance of the divine light, the hollow chill of hell, or the voice that gently called me back to this world? Helof, here, Kimeti Alf, Divos, Dief. You don't understand at all, I continued. I've seen what lies beyond this life. I learned what love truly is, and whatever existed between us, I said, gesturing at the space separating us like a canyon. It was never that. Words tumbled out of me, truths I had buried under years of silent suffering. I spoke of the betrayal, the loneliness, the crushing weight of trying to keep a marriage alive when the foundation had long since crumbled. Then I spoke of Jacob, our son, my guiding light. I told Archie about the vision I had of him standing tall, walking again, living a life so full it glowed. He's going to achieve things we can even imagine, and he'll need us, both of us, to help get there. A strange heat bloomed in my chest, not rage, conviction. It's over, I repeated, calmer now, more certain than I had ever been. Don call us. Don right. If you want to change, then do it, far from me and Jacob. I turned and walked away from the man who had once been my everything. Behind me, I heard the faint clink of metal on pavement. I didn't need to look back to know it was his wedding ring. That part of my life was done. Each step sent aches rippling through my battered body, but my mind was clear, my heart startlingly light. I had died that night, but I had also been reborn. The days and weeks that followed were a whirlwind of tangled emotions and stubborn pain. Physically, my body mended slowly. My throat ached when I spoke, and bruises painted my skin for far too long. But the deepest wounds were invisible. Every time I closed my eyes, the memory rushed back. Archie's face twisted with rage, the suffocating grip, the final gasps. I sought therapy because I knew I couldn't climb out of that darkness alone. It was brutal, dredging up that night again and again, forcing myself to say things that felt unspeakable. But each session chipped away at the terror. The hardest part to share wasn't the attack, it was everything beyond it. How could I explain slipping out of my body, he's seeing eternity blaze before me, then descending into a realm of agony? I feared my therapist would think me delusional. Instead, she listened with eyes full of gentle curiosity. Slowly, she helped me understand that my experience didn't need to be hidden in shame. It could become a cornerstone of who I was becoming. Meanwhile, I had to unravel my feelings about Archie, betrayal, grief, and somewhere tangled among them, an odd compassion left over from standing so close to divine truth. Forgiveness would not be loud or quick. It would be a slow, private road. Jacob was my anchor through it all. He was frightened and confused, never quite sure why we were suddenly living at my aunt's house or why his father had vanished. I explained what I could in words that wouldn't splinter his spirit. Watching his young resilience reminded me of the vision I'd been gifted, a future where he walked freely, where light shone out of him. That promise became the hand I held when the nights grew too long. We built a new life from scratch, a small apartment, simple routines, morning coffee, short walks to school, dinners we cooked together. Returning to work meant braving awkward questions and sympathetic glances, but I faced them all. Having come so close to death, I found myself savoring small things that once went unnoticed. Jacob's laughter in the next room, the amber wash of evening sun on our kitchen floor, the comforting crackle of bacon in the pan. These ordinary moments became holy. I turned to meditation, not to escape, but to touch that quiet, sacred space I had once floated in. Some days it felt a million miles away, but other days I felt that peace settle around me like a familiar shawl. I didn't return to a church pew. Instead, I nurtured a private faith that bloomed from what I had witnessed. I wasn't just healing, I was transforming. I became steadier, more empathetic, less rattled by life's tempests. I had stood on the other side of death, and fear lost its grip on me. This second chance was a gift, and I refused to squander it. Challenges still came, of course, but I was no longer afraid. I had walked through hell, literally, and come back. In time, I began telling my story in quiet circles, then to larger groups. Not for applause or pity, but because I knew someone listening might be silently pleading for proof that healing was real. I wasn't some spiritual expert. I was simply a woman who had been shattered and remade, walking forward now with hands open and heart tender. Jacob was always my compass. Hey! Encouraged his courage on days when his legs trembled. Hey! When doctors proposed an experimental therapy that could rebuild strength in his muscles, Jacob agreed without blinking. It was grueling and slow, but we held each other up. The morning he took 3 steps on his own, I fell to my knees in tears. Not because it was some miracle, but because it was a testament to faith, endurance, and a love that refused to give up. I never went back to Archie, but in time I did forgive him, not for his sake, but for mine. Years later, when Jacob, now older, wanted to reconnect with his father, he needed to find his own way to forgiveness, just as I had. Seeing them together brought a kind of soft closure, a chapter gently shutting instead of slamming closed. Today, I live quietly on purpose. I wake up grateful. I see every person I cross paths with as an opportunity to extend kindness. I don't pretend there's no darkness left in the world, but I've learned to carry a lantern into it, and to me, that's the deepest miracle. Maybe my story is finished, but the truth it uncovered still calls to each of us. This life isn't all there is. Heaven is breathtakingly real. Hell is devastatingly real, and every small decision we make ripples through eternity. If these words stirred something in you, share them. If these words stirred something in you, share them. Someone you care about might be desperately waiting for hope. They might be teetering on the edge, and you could be the very voice God wants to use to call them back into the light. And if you or someone you love has ever glimpsed beyond this life, seen a flash of the divine, or returned from the thin line between life and death, reach out. We're here to listen, to pray, and to walk this journey with you.